Brett Garsed, welcome back to Australian Musician.
Thanks for having me.
We did an interview with you not that long ago, about 6 or 7 months ago, on Zoom. So I won't go too far back. I wanted to this time start with now,
Okay.
what you're currently doing. In May this year, there was an album released by a band called Horizon,
Yep.
led by Lee Bradshaw, featuring yourself, the late great Stuart Fraser, Angus Birchall and Rich Panaya. The music on this album features elements of hard rock, Brit rock, prog rock. Sounds like music that you grew up with.
Oh yeah. I mean, I guess I just started with pop rock, that sort of thing, but then heard Deep Purple at a young age, and my older brother, he was 10 years older than me, he had all the Zeppelin records, Hendrix, Santana, Pink Floyd, you name it. Like that was my steady diet when I was young.
Yeah. So was that the part of the appeal of doing this project?
Yeah, look, Lee just contacted me out of the blue. I was living in Queensland at the time on the Gold Coast, and he just contacted me and said, "Can I send you a track?" And I think the track was called Sex and Love. That was the first thing I played on. And yeah, I was just blown out. I was amazed at what a singer he was, what an amazing singer. And then, of course, later on, as we became more friends, I found out he was an incredible composer and arranger, and it just went on and on. So yeah, he just kept sending me tracks, and I kept playing on them and just loving it.
Yeah, the album's had quite a journey. It was recorded initially probably a decade ago.
Yeah, it'd be a while ago. Yeah, we did the tracks.
Lee Bradshaw tells me that it was Martin Pullen, the engineer, that got you all together.
Yeah, I think that was it. I think Martin. I can't remember whether Lee was looking for me or Angus Birchall. I can't remember, but I think Martin was the guy that said, just call him or email him or something, just contact him. I think a lot of people thought we were out of touch because we were working with John, and that wasn't the case at all. It's like I sort of, even to this day, I sit at home and wonder why no one calls me for anything, and I don't know. It's, maybe they think I'm too busy doing something else, But yeah, Lee just took the leap, and in the end we all ended up working on it, so it was great.
Yeah, recorded at Armstrong Studios initially, and there was a live video recorded, which is going to become a documentary, I believe. Yeah,
I don't think I even knew they were filming any of that stuff, so I hope I don't do anything untoward on it. So.
It's great that we'll have wonderful documentation of Chet.
That's
work.
It. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. I believe you first come across Stuart Fraser reading about the band Feather and Duke magazine.
That's right, yeah. I remember I used to buy Duke all the time because I was just hungry for any kind of music information back then. So I was 14, and I remember seeing their picture in there, and they were raving about Stuart Fraser, who was only 16. And I thought, oh, geez, he's only 2 years older than me. And then, of course, I'm watching Countdown, and Feather had a song called Girl Trouble. I remember it vividly, and Stuart did the solo on it, of course, and I went, well, it's over. This is a 16-year-old. He was so much better than me, but I guess luckily not all 16-year-olds were as good as Stuart.
Yeah. What did you like about Stuart's playing?
It just sounded ready to go. Like the funny thing was, Stuart had vibrato. Like he could vibrato the strings, and I was thinking, how come when he hits high notes they sound exciting? Mine don't sound exciting. I hadn't learned vibrato yet because I was basically completely self-taught. I didn't give the guy that. I had a great teacher initially, this guy named Jeff Lyons, who was sort of very much a local legend in Castlemaine. And Jeff gave me 4 lessons, but I never really gave him a chance to continue because I quit and decided to amble along on my own. And if I'd stuck with Jeff, I would have learned all this stuff. But luckily, once again, watching Countdown, and AC/DC were doing it. I forget what it was. It was like Livewire or something. And right at the end of the clip, I think they were just miming, and Angus stuck the guitar right in the camera and wobbled the string. And I went, there it is. Got to wobble the string. So, but that was it. That was what I loved about Stuart's playing. And then, of course, years later when Noiseworks happened, I just thought, this is an amazing band. I'm a huge Noiseworks fan from the get-go.
Yeah. Lee Bradshaw told me the great story about David Carr, who worked on the Horizon
Yeah,
project as well. Just happened to have a Marshall amplifier. Can you recall that story for us?
Well, yeah, I had the old Marshall. I bought that when I was about 16 or 17, I think. My mother was, God bless her, took a huge financial leap of faith when I was about 13 and bought me my old Sunburst Strat, which I've still got, which I played up until I got Charles Silia's beautiful guitar here. And I thought, well, I've got the Strat, now I've got to get the Marshall because Richie Blackmore. And I ended up buying the Marshall from Guitar Village in Frankston. And 100 watt super lead, built in 1970. And I used that my entire playing life. I recorded Whispering Jack with it, and it was still around even when we did Chain Reaction and stuff like that. I couldn't use it live because it was a bit unreliable. It would blow up every now and then. And I ended up going to America, and I came back in the mid-90s and thought, oh, I'll get it out of the road cases and plug it in, and it just needed servicing, but like an idiot, I thought, it doesn't work anymore, I may as well sell it. And so I think my mate Steve Harvey sold it to some guy in Bendigo, who then sold it as a trade into a music store. And we went looking for it. This was about 2016, and I thought, I've got to find this amp again if it still exists. And Steve was helping me look for it, and that's where the trail went cold. He said, well, music store had it, guy walks in and buys it, it's gone. And I think either later that year, it's weird, like later that year, only a few months later, and I'm coming down to Melbourne to do a session with Lee at his studio, and he sends me a photo on my phone, and he says, you recognise this amp? And it's a Marshall half stack. Texted back and I said no, and he said, well, you should, it used to be yours. And it turned out Dave Carr was rehearsing at the studio with that amp. And I had a conversation with Dave on the phone, and he said he'd leave it there for me to use the next day when we did the stuff with Lee. It was great. I did ask him, I said, Dave, will you sell it back to me? And he said, oh yeah, probably to pay for my own funeral. And I thought, yeah, that'll be a no. He's smarter than I was, he's not letting go of it, so it's a good amp.
Yeah. The band is playing this music live at a gig at the Evelyn Hotel on August 8.
Yep.
What will your stage rig be for that gig?
I'm in two minds actually, because I normally use the fractal gear, like the Axe FX stuff, which can produce a massive sound. I mean, it's a great thing. But just recently, a friend of mine decided to lend me his Bogner 3534, I think they call them. They're like a 35 watt version of the Ecstasy head. And I used to own an Ecstasy, which I brought back from America with me, but my wife and I were trying to build a house, so the Ecstasy had to go. I thought I'll just get another one day, but seeing as they're about $8,000 now, I don't think that's going to happen anytime soon. So, gee, I must admit, if you'll let me borrow it for the gig, I'd be pretty keen to use it because it just sounds monstrous.
Yeah. What do you hope to get out of the whole Horizon experience, and what's the future for the band?
Well, I mean, I have no idea what the future is. That's up to Lee and Rich, but what I'd like to see come out of it is wider recognition for the album, not only for all the hard work that Rich and Lee have put into this for the past 2 decades probably, but just also for the majesty of Stuart's playing on it. I mean, he and Lee worked closely on this material, and yeah, I just love people to hear him. You know, just so fortunate to have got to know him as a friend and to work with him so closely. I learned so much from watching him, watching how he did what he did, and a genius, an absolute genius. That's not an understatement to say that.
How did you work out the guitar parts between you for the album?
You know, a lot of times we wouldn't necessarily talk about it because we were very different as players, and but I just love Stuart's playing so much, and he was just such a master of coming up with a part right away. Like, he'd come up with a part for a song, and I think that's one of the things I learned from him was that he would sit quietly and listen to the song, and he would imagine what to play. And then he would walk back into the studio and he'd grab this guitar and plug it into that amp and play this part, and that's the song. Whereas I'd be noodling around trying to figure out the chords and carrying on. It's like, that can all come later, but first, what are you going to do? And that was the artistry that Stuart always brought to a session. I mean, I always thought, when I was living in America for so long, I thought, and I'd come back and work with John, and Stuart would be in the band, and I'd just look at him and go, if I had the connections, I would just manage you and take you to America, and you would make a fortune. I'd have you working 24/7 in the studios. He would have been the most in-demand studio guy. So yeah, that's what I'd like to see.
Yeah. Another current thing that you're doing, you've got the hybrid picking book out. Who taught you hybrid picking?
Oh, nobody taught me anything. I just sort of bumble along and do my own thing. That guy, Jeff Lyons, great, like I said, great player, great teacher. And I think, what was I, about 12 or something? And took my first lesson from him. He said, "What do you want to do?" And I said, "I want to play lead guitar, Richie Blackmore, you know." And he said, "All right, fair enough." And he goes, 4 frets, 4 fingers. And that was a beautiful lesson, like right off the bat, use all your fingers. And I thought, that's a good one, because sometimes guitar players can get stuck with these 3, and this little fella just sort of is a reserve tank, whereas I was using it all the time. And the hybrid picking thing came about because I must have read an interview that Jimmy Page used to play acoustic with a flat pick in his other fingers. And I think that's what I read, unless I got it wrong. But I thought, okay, well, that's what I do. I'm trying to play Leo Kottke songs with a flat pick and wondering why it's so hard. And I was trying to play this beautiful acoustic intro to a Black Sabbath song called Spiral Architect. I think it's the last song on the Sabbath Bloody Sabbath album. And Tony Iommi did this beautiful interlude or intro for it. And it's sort of a 4-string piece, and I'm sure Tony played it classical style with the thumb and these 3 fingers, whereas I didn't know you could do that. And I'm trying to play it with a flat pick and the other 3 fingers, and it was very, very hard. But as a result of that and pursuing the Leo Kottke stuff, I developed a lot of facility in my other fingers, and then I started to see country players, and I thought, oh, okay, so they do this, and of course they do. They've been doing it for decades. And jazz players do it, everybody does it, but I've just got a bit of a unique twist on it.
Are you fussy about your accessories, things like guitar picks and cables?
Well, fussy to the point where with cables, I just hope they don't break. You know, it's usually you got a $3,000 setup sitting there, and it's a $5 guitar cable. It'll jet it, sort of stump the whole thing. But so I just like reliable stuff. I use Diodario cables, and because I endorse Diodario strings, and they make all the other bits as well. I use their picks. So I've experimented with other picks, but I do like to just go for the good old 1mm nylon ones, and sort of at least they're easy to find, and I've got a lot of them. So.
Yeah. You're also working on a slide guitar book?
Yeah. Actually, a legato book just came out about a month ago, and I've also done another book on chromaticism. Which it's funny how all these things sort of roll along. Like I was always a legato player where you don't pick all the notes, and that's why when I heard Alan Holdsworth, I really fell in love with Alan's playing, because he was the master of that particular style. And then the chromatic stuff came about from Steve Lukather, because he did this incredible solo at the end of a Toto song called White Sister, and all I could figure out from it was that he was playing 4 semitones in a row, and that really changed how I played in a big way. And I got to meet Steve earlier this year, which was fantastic. He's been such a hero of mine for so long. It was lovely just to meet the guy and express that. But and then the slide playing actually really came about because of Rick Formosa, when LRB did a song called Every Day of My Life, and I saw him on Countdown, and Rick was playing slide, and he had the slide on his 3rd finger. So I went out and bought a slide because I thought, that sounds great, got to have a go at that. And it was horrible. It always is. I mean, no one ever starts off playing slide and has it sound good. No one in history's ever done that. Even Dwayne Allman said in an interview that he said he'd put the thing on his finger and the whole band would go, oh no. I thought, oh, there's hope for all of us then. And so I gave that up, and then was watching TV again when I was about 16, and Joe Walsh came on doing Rocky Mountain Way live, and I thought, I've got to have another crack at this. And Joe put it on his 2nd finger. So I came back and did that, and it still sounded terrible, but a good mate of mine, Glenn Quilly said, you got to tune your guitar to a chord. So I went out and bought a cheap Les Paul copy and tuned it to open E, and that did help. Like, you could get more of a handle on it. But then when I went back to standard tuning like this guitar is, I had to start angling the slide to get certain intervals, and people always remarked it was quite unique. And for a while I thought I might have invented something, and then when YouTube became a thing in about 2003, I saw a clip of Jeff Beck who'd been doing it for decades. So, you know, nothing's original. nothing I do is original. But
do you prefer glass slides?
Glass is good on electric, but chrome is good too. Like I actually find sometimes with the glass when I vibrato it squeaks a bit, but the chrome doesn't do that. But I can't find a chrome slide that's long enough. Like I only like the slide to come down to my sort of knuckle here on my second finger, and the glass ones come out to about there, which is handy because I angle it and I can get intervals, triads and things like that, and octaves and all sorts of stuff. And the chrome ones are all a bit shorter. So if I ever find a chrome one that's a bit longer, I'll buy it.
Yeah. I last saw you play at the Melbourne Guitar Show doing the fabulous Jeff Beck show with Paul Mason.
Yeah.
And I think you have a show coming up on the 4th of July?
Yeah, 4th of July, yeah.
Birds Basement.
At Birds, yeah.
What was it about Jeff Beck's playing that you love so much?
Everything. I mean, everything. My brother-in-law, Wayne McKay, I used to go and stay with him and my sister when I was very young in the school holidays, and it was just fun to go and stay with him because Wayne's a fantastic drummer and he'd play in a band and I get to go and see the band, and I vividly remember I couldn't have been any more than about 12 or 13. And I was rifling through his record collection, and he has a fantastic record collection. And I pull out this album and it's got a bloke on it with a guitar and it's Jeff Beck wired, and I thought, no, let's check it out. Lead Boots was the first thing I heard, and it just blew my head off. Still does. When I listen to it to this day, it still just destroys me. And the funny thing was, after I heard that, then Wayne said, I've got another album of his, and he gave me Blow by Blow, and I realised that in the old days, when you lived in the country, when the local news would switch to the Melbourne news, there would be a bit of a gap for when they would do the changeover for the signal, and they just played music. And they were playing She's a Woman by Jeff Beck, so a lot of those tunes, I'd already heard them, but I didn't know what they were. And so, yeah, after that moment, that was it. I was a Jeff Beck fan, and so There and Back, Flash, you name it, Guitar Shop, all of it. So.
Richie Blackmore keeps coming up in your interviews as an influence. Have you ever done a Richie Blackmore tribute show? Or thought
Not a tribute show. We used to play a lot of tunes when we were kids in our pub band. We'd play a lot of Deep Purple stuff, a lot of Rainbow stuff. The first big concert I ever saw was AC/DC in Castlemaine in 1976. And then it was either later that year or the next year, my brother took me and my two cousins down here to Festival Hall and we saw Rainbow. And then I got to see Richie again with Deep Purple back in the early 80s on the Perfect Strangers tour. But yeah, Richie had a huge impact on me. Like, he was, I just considered his playing, people like him and Brian May and Jeff Beck, they were sort of the link between the more blues rock oriented players and then where playing was going to go with more progressive players like Eddie Van Halen and things like that. So there was just a level of technical proficiency and attitude that was more modern, I thought, for that time.
The John Farnham connection, we know, came about. You sent a letter and a tape to Glenn Wheatley.
Yeah.
He famously wrote back to you, and you've still got the letter.
I've still got the letter, yeah.
And the first thing that you did with John was a pub tour.
Yeah.
What are your memories of that pub tour?
Oh, it was great. This was before Whispering Jack, so the band was Derek Polici from LRB, Nicky Nichols on vocals, Bruno de Stanislaw on bass, Sam C on guitar, and David Hirschfelder on keys. And I was so glad Sam was there. I was really petrified that I'd be the only guitar player, and I was only 21 and I hadn't had any experience. I mean, I'd been in a pub band with my cousins for 10 years, and when I found out Sam was going to be there, I thought, oh, thank God, because I already knew who Sam was from Stockley C and Mason and Goanna and all the rest of it, so thank God we had a pro. And it was brilliant. Like the first, the funniest thing was the first gig we did was at this little pub in a place called Wallace, which is in between, I don't know, Ballarat and Daylesford or something. And we played there at this pub with our pub band. And the lady that owned the pub just yelled at us all night because we were too loud. She hated us. And we had this tiny little PA system and everything. And wouldn't you know it, the very first gig I do with John is same pub, same lady. And I'm looking at the PA going, oh, she thought we were too loud, she's going to get a shock here. And we were playing a pretty full-on set. We were playing Black Knight and Legs and all sorts of, it was pretty rock show. And she sat in the front row and just loved every minute of it, you know, and just looking at John like this, going, oh, this is great. Would have been, her hair would have been getting blown back, you know. And I went, ah, there it is. That's showbiz for you. So, and then other gigs like the Palace. We played at the Palace, you know, the joint down near the Palais that burned down, and absolutely just packed to the rafters. Like fire marshals would have had a field day if they'd cared back then, but it was just wild and raucous, and I thought, this is great. I want more of this. I want to do this. And then the interesting thing was we went up and did about a week's worth of gigs at Twin Towns in Coolangatta. And we're in the RSL place, you know, and I'm waiting for the curtains to come back, and I'm waiting for the Palace, you know, like pubs, people down the front with 4 beers. And it was not that at all. It was a half full at best, much older crowd. And on the Saturday night, it filled up a little bit more. And that's when I realised that, you know, John's pull in the Melbourne pubs was profound. He could do that, but I was shocked that they were all there to hear older material that John had done, like probably Raindrops, stuff like that. And then when we went back on the Whispering Jack tour, there were just lines around the block. So it was beautiful.
Yeah. Farnham Band has always been full of Australia's top musicians, so it must have been a joy playing with guys like that.
Oh, heaven, yeah.
Yeah. So how much difference does it make to your playing when you've done so many stage hours with a band as opposed to just doing a spot with a band or musicians maybe you haven't played with before?
Right. Well, I mean, when you've done it for a long time, there's a certain level of professionalism where you just can click with people straight away anyway. But there's just something about a band, you know. I feel like I was always born to be in a band. That's what I always wanted to do. And John's band was a band in every sense of the word, including him. Like, he was so much more involved in everything than other performers. He always sound checked, he always rehearsed. He didn't just let us rehearse for 2 weeks, he popped in for a couple of days. John was always there at sound check. He was always present and involved everybody in everything. It was just wonderful. I think he wanted a band, and he loved knowing that we knew him so well. He could do anything up there and we had his back. Like, if he did an extra chorus, and we're doing an extra chorus, you know, and if he went to the verse early, we'll go into the verse and follow him. Just watch him, follow him, and no matter what happened, we've got him. And I think he loved that. It was one of the few instances I can recall, other than maybe Bruce Springsteen, where he used us in the studio as well as live. Like, especially American artists, they very rarely use the same band in the studio as they toured with, and they very rarely use the same touring band. So maybe Billy Joel. I mean, I think Billy Joel usually had the same band in the studio, but yeah, John was just great.
Yeah, we were talking off air before. You mentioned that John had a guitar, and I asked you about his guitar playing. If you could just recall what we were talking about then.
Yeah, he was sitting backstage with an acoustic we just usually had kicking around, and was just sort of nonchalantly sitting there and drifting off into space, but he was playing this really incredible syncopated riff, and I said, what's that? And he said, it's Playing to Win, it's how I wrote it. And I said, you wrote that on guitar? And he said, yeah, and it didn't click for me that he wrote it on guitar, because I always assumed David Hirschfelder wrote the riff using the Fairlight and the keyboards, and because that's what plays it on the actual song. And John said, no, this is how I wrote it, and Hershey transferred it to the Fairlight to give it that sound, and it's incredibly syncopated. It's actually quite a difficult thing to play on guitar, but John could do it easily. And John's a phenomenal musician. I mean, he's got a phenomenal ear for harmony and melody and pitch and all the rest of it. He's a beautiful keyboard player and a great guitar player, and has an incredible feel for syncopation. Like, he's a phenomenal percussionist. Give him a tambourine, he's one of the best in the world. Like, just amazing. And all this comes out in his singing, of course. And he just doesn't rate himself because he's just so humble, but I'll brag for him.
Yeah. Learning the guitar, do you recall many sort of milestone moments? For instance, like I used to just muck around playing to records, listen to Carlos Santana and thought I could forget it. I could never do anything like that.
Right.
And then just playing along and playing, you sort of start to mimic some lines and think, oh God, I can do that. I can see a pathway. Do you remember sort of moments?
Lots of those, yeah.
Along the way?
Yeah, there was one moment. I was definitely trying to get a handle on one of Richie Blackmore's solos from Made in Japan. It was the Child in Time solo, big wild live solo, and he kept doing these notes, and they sounded bigger, and I couldn't figure out why. And I'd bend up to the note, and I'd go, yeah, but Richie sounds different. I was like, I don't know what's going on. And one day I accidentally held the same note on the first string and bent up from a whole step down on the second string, and I got the two notes in unison when you bend, and then when you move it around, you can. And I went, there it is. That's the sound. Things like that, like the first day I got feedback out of my amplifier, and there were so many moments like that. Just little discoveries of chords and things, and they opened doors, and all of a sudden you realise that it was possible. Like, you know, I thought I can learn how to do this if I just stick with it and go hard enough. It was just that mystery because I was self-taught. Like I said, if you get a good teacher or go to a good college, which none of that really existed back then. There was no one around. I looked, and there was no one in my area that could teach me any of this stuff. And there were no colleges back then or schools, so I was on my own. But now, and let alone with the internet, you can carve decades off you. Kids can, in a year, they can learn what would have taken me 10 years.
What was the last genuinely new thing that you learned about playing guitar?
Well, actually, with the slide guitar stuff, I figured out how to do octaves in standard tuning, which is quite demanding and a bit touch and go, but it's great fun if you can get it in tune. And you've got to do the severe angling thing and do it between the fifth and second string or the first and fourth strings. But it's something that's very easy to do in an open tuning because it's just straight across and it all sits right there. And I was in the process of doing the book. I was a little before that. I was thinking I'd love to be able to mimic the sound of a B bender, like when they have a mechanism in the guitar where it'll attach to your second string and sometimes your third string. It's either a lever that sits on top of the guitar or a mechanism that's built into the guitar, and you can pull down on your strap and it'll just raise the second string a half step. So you can hold a major triad across the second, third and fourth strings and pull down on it and you can get a sus chord. And it's a beautiful sound. It's very pedal steel. And I realised that if I hit the triad with the slide, I could reach behind it with my second finger if I go back far enough and actually pull the string up. And if I push down with my thumb on the third string, I just put a video up on my YouTube channel of me doing it. To my knowledge, no one's ever done it before. I don't think that's anything to hang your hat on, you know. I don't think it's like, oh yeah, things are really going to start happening for me now. But it was just fun to realise that you imagine wanting something to happen and you think, well, how do I do it? How am I going to make it happen? And you realise that that's how everybody figured anything out, isn't it? I suppose that's why a B bender got invented. Someone said, no, we've got to attach it to the guitar. Who would have thought of putting it on the guitar strap where you pull down on it? So necessity and the mother of invention, all that stuff. But yeah, it's good. It's just nice to see at this ripe old age I can still learn things and discover things.
You brought along your latest guitar, the Charles Silia guitar. Let's have a look at it and tell me about the main elements you needed from the guitar to be happy with it.
It's sort of a hybrid of a whole bunch of other guitars. Actually, it's the Strat. It's everyone looks at it and goes, "Oh, you've copied your ESP." Like I used to play a beautiful ESP Horizon Custom, which I still have, of course, and it just looks like this. I just love blue guitars. What can I say? But the two humbuckers like the ESP, so it's 24 frets instead of 22 like a Strat, so that's another aspect of the ESP. I've gone with a standard bridge, but it's a Callahan bridge. They're American made, I think, really beautiful. And eventually these tuners, we've got to build another neck for it to accommodate them, but there'll be Steinberger tuners in here which will make it really unique. And other than that, it's just a beautifully made instrument. And ever since Charles gave it to me, I haven't been able to stop playing it. So, lucky me.
How do you like your action?
Well, I prefer to have it a bit lower, but because I'm stubborn about playing slide on the same guitar, it's got to be up a bit. It's just one of those compromises you have to be willing to make. So it slows me down a bit, but I think that's a good thing. You know, to be honest, look, I'd sit there and just absolutely marvel at the technical ability of all the young players that are out there these days, and even some of the older players. And I think, you know what, I'm not in that headspace anymore. I'd rather think a bit more about what I'm doing and take my time a bit more now. So I don't really mind, and I do love playing slide. I wish I got more opportunity to do it.
Do you play acoustic much?
Not much, no. No, I struggle with acoustics, and that's because I don't play them. I love hearing other people play them. I'll listen to Tom Emmanuel play them all day, and see, Stuart Fraser was such a fantastic acoustic player. Usually when something like that came up, I was like, here you go, Chet, you know, this is your domain. It's just funny that he never ended up doing Burn For You, because I don't know, for some reason they just said, yeah, you got to learn this acoustic tune called Burn For You, and you'll be playing that with John. And that was the same tour that I met Stuart on. And then later on, when I saw Stuart play the acoustic, I thought, why aren't you doing this? But he loved the way I played it, which I thought was a wonderful thing to say, and John was happy. So, and it was such an honour to get to play that song with John. I mean, Phil Buckle's beautiful guitar piece. So yeah, how could I say no?
Yeah. So you've got Horizon, the album's out, you're playing live on August 8, you've got the Beck thing on July 4 with Paul Mason, you've got the books out. What else is in the works for you?
Yeah, this is kind of the part of the interview where I feel a bit guilty, because I think people are... It's the sideman thing, where usually what you do is you sort of big up what you're working on and who you're working with, and there's none of that really going on for me. Like, I mean, I'd love to say, well, yeah, I've just finished the Rolling Stones tour and was supposed to go out with Sting, but that pesky Stevie Wonder called up and now I can't do it, and you know, there's none of that. But I mean, for 40 years I worked with John, and that was it. You know, it wasn't like, well, what are you doing? I work with the biggest artist in Australian history. That's what I'm doing. And what are you doing? You know, and it's like, everyone's like, I want your gig. That's what I'm doing. And I don't blame them, you know. Like, I mean, I had this magical situation with the greatest, in my opinion, the greatest living male singer, and the most beautiful working environment that he and Glenn Wheatley built and nurtured. I'll never find it again. I know that. And so everything else is kind of just, it just sort of pales in comparison. So I'm all right. To be honest, I like doing the books because they're about subjects that are very personal to me, and I do feel they're quite original. It's not like I'm doing books on 3-note per string scales or the cage system or something like that. Like, these are new ideas that are quite unique to what I do. So I feel that's more personal than going out and learning somebody else's set and playing with them. It'd have to be a really special situation for me to get excited about it these days.
Yeah. And the books are available on your website? No,
they're available through guitarvivo.com.
Okay.
That's the company that I do the books for. So yeah, Guitar Vivo.
Yeah. Well, Brett, it's been great to catch up again, and we look forward to another chat further down the track.
Oh, my pleasure. Anytime. Thank you.